Picture this. You did everything they told you to do. You worked, you saved, you stayed patient. You watched your retirement account grow slowly, responsibly, quietly. And yet, retirement still feels out of reach. Not delayed, not smaller than expected, out of reach. This isn't because you failed. It's because the 401k experiment did, and almost no one wants to say that out loud. Because the 401k wasn't just a retirement plan. It was a promise, a story, an experiment in shifting risk from institutions to individuals and hoping no one noticed. To understand why so many people can't retire today, we have to rewind, not to a market crash, not to inflation, but to a decision made decades ago that quietly changed how retirement works in America. For most of the 20th century, retirement was boring, intentionally boring. You worked for a company, you stayed long enough, and when you retired, the company paid you a pension, a predictable check, every month for life. The risk wasn't on you, it was on the employer. They had to manage the investments. They had to make sure the math worked. They had to deal with market downturns. Your job was simple: show up, work, and eventually stop working. Then the 1970s happened. Inflation spiked. Markets got volatile. Companies started realizing that pensions were expensive, complicated, and risky for them. So they looked for an alternative. What they found wasn't originally designed as a retirement system at all. It was a small technical tax rule added to the IRS code in 1978, Section 401k. At first, it was niche, a supplement, a side option for executives. But companies noticed something important. With a 401k, they didn't promise an outcome. They just offered a container. You put money in, they maybe matched a little. What happened next was your problem. No lifetime guarantees, no obligation to manage risk, no responsibility for market crashes. By the 1980s and 90s, pensions started disappearing, and the 401k quietly took their place. This was sold as empowerment. Control your own future, own your retirement, let your money work for you. It sounded modern, flexible, optimistic. But here's the part that rarely gets mentioned. The 401k shifted three massive risks onto individuals, risks most people were never equipped to manage: market risk, longevity risk, and timing risk. Let's unpack that slowly. Market risk is obvious. Your retirement depends on the stock market going up over time. Not just over time, but over your time. If markets crash when you're 30, it's annoying. If they crash when you're 64, it's catastrophic. In a pension system, that risk was pooled. In a 401k, it's personal. Longevity risk is quieter, but more dangerous. No one knows how long they'll live. Retire too early and you might outlive your savings. Spend too cautiously and you live your last decades afraid to spend your own money. Pensions solved this by paying for life. 401ks leave you guessing. Then there's timing risk, the cruelest of all. Two people can save the same amount, invest the same way, and end up with wildly different retirements based on one thing: when they happen to retire. A bad decade at the wrong moment doesn't just reduce returns, it permanently changes your future. The system pretends this averages out. It doesn't. Now here's where the experiment really starts to crack. The math. We're told a simple story: save consistently, invest in diversified funds, let compound interest do the heavy lifting. But compound interest doesn't exist in a vacuum. It requires time, stable income, low fees, low inflation, and no major interruptions. Most people don't get that combination. Wages haven't grown much in real terms for decades. Housing, healthcare, and education costs exploded. Many people tapped their 401ks early,
for emergencies, layoffs, medical bills. Every early withdrawal doesn't just reduce your balance, it destroys future compounding. And then there are fees. They look small, 0.5% here, 1% there. Over a career, they quietly eat a shocking share of your returns. This is the part that's almost absurd. The system tells individuals to become long-term investors while placing them inside a financial industry that profits whether they succeed or not. Markets go up, fees. Markets go down, still fees. You panic and trade, more fees. The industry gets paid for activity. Retirement requires patience. Those incentives are not aligned. Meanwhile, the average account balance tells a brutal story. Not the average nearing retirement, the median. For people in their 60s, it's often not enough to replace even a modest income, especially once you factor in inflation and healthcare. Which brings us to the quiet irony. The 401k works best for people who need it the least. High earners, stable careers, employer matches, financial literacy, no long gaps in employment. For everyone else, it's fragile. Miss a few years of contributions, enter the workforce late, care for family, get hit by layoffs at the wrong time. The model breaks down quickly. And yet, we keep treating this as a personal failure. You didn't save enough. You should have invested better. You should have started earlier. That framing is convenient because it ignores the system design. The 401k assumes a smooth, predictable working life in an economy that hasn't been smooth or predictable for decades. It assumes discipline without emergencies, markets without crashes, longevity without healthcare shocks. It assumes people can behave like institutions without institutional tools. This is where the hype really starts to collapse. We were told the shift from pensions to 401ks was modernization, efficiency, freedom. In reality, it was a cost transfer. From companies to workers, from pooled risk to individual risk, from guaranteed outcomes to probabilistic hope. And hope is not a retirement plan. Zoom out, and the implications get uncomfortable. A generation approaching retirement with insufficient savings doesn't just affect individuals, it reshapes the economy. People delay retirement. Younger workers face fewer opportunities. Consumption slows. Healthcare costs rise. And quietly, pressure builds on public systems that were never designed to replace private retirement income entirely. This is why the conversation feels tense right now. Because the experiment didn't fail all at once. It failed slowly, quietly, unevenly. It worked well enough to be defended and poorly enough to leave millions exposed. No dramatic collapse, no single villain, just math doing what math does. So here we are, a system built on personal responsibility in a world that systematically eroded the conditions needed to fulfill it. And the most uncomfortable part, we're still running the experiment, still telling people the same story, still pretending the outcome is mostly about discipline, still avoiding the structural question underneath it all. Not did you save enough, but should retirement ever have depended this heavily on individual market timing in the first place? Because once you ask that, you start seeing the 401k not as a solution that fell short, but as a risk-shifting experiment that delivered exactly what it was designed to, and left everyone else to deal with the consequences.